Well, I'd like to welcome you all to this panel on the Chinese AI ecosystem. It is, I'm sure some of you may know, recently been the Chinese New Year, so Happy New Year to everybody. It's the year of the snake. Is that lucky?
Year of the python.
Oh, it's the python, sorry, right? The python. It's a specific type of snake. I was kind of half right. It's a python. Python.
It's abstract.
No.
That's a joke. Chinese.
But apparently
it's the best language.
But apparently, the year of the snake means we're looking in 2025 towards a year of transformation, wisdom, and personal growth, which I thought was quite fitting given the events of the last week or two. And I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about this Chinese ecosystem with three esteemed panelists and three guests. I will say before we start that we're going to run this as a Chatham House rules panel. So obviously everything shared within here is in the confines of these walls, please. And I'd firstly like to introduce you to Nadia. Nadia, would you mind quickly talking to us about what you're all about, in Amanda's words?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me today. I'm Nadia, and I'm now working at a fintech company called Ant Group, the company behind Alipay in China, as the head of open source growth. But in the tech conferences, I prefer to introduce my community head. So in my spare time, I contributed a lot to the community. I'm the board chair of Kaiyuanshe, that is the China Open Source Alliance. We consider Kaiyuanshe like a community of communities. We help people to connect many China local open source communities. And I'm also a PMC chair, a PMC member of Apache Answer. That is a top-level project graduated from the Apache Software Incubator last month. Yes. And besides, okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, and besides, I'm also a global speaker at many tech conferences. I'm also a big fan of Open UK, so I'm the volunteer of this year and last year's State of OpenCon. So that's all.
Thank you, Nadia. And Richard?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Richard, number one. You will know that very soon, what I mean by that. So my name is Richard Bian. I work for Ant Group Open Source. I built Ant Group Open Source Program Office back in 2021 and has been running the team since then. Yeah, so like I've been pretty much having several titles in the open source communities as well. I've been working with Linux Foundation and Data as outreach chair last year. Have been volunteering my time for several other communities as well. Just kind of like fun fact or just a fact for myself, I've been pretty much spending like 20 plus years outside of China. So inside China, I had my high school in Singapore and university in Toronto, Canada. Has been working in the States for like 11 years. For Microsoft and Square, that's how it kind of brought me to my current job at Ant Group. So I'm a big fan of fintech. In fact, I think it's probably one of the common denominator in conjunction with open source, which connects people across the globe. Yeah, very glad to be here.
Thank you, Richard. So from Richard 1 to Richard 2.
Yes, my name is Richard Lin, Richard L. This is Richard B, Richard Bian, yeah. And yeah, so also Richard, maybe Richard number 2, you're number 1. Okay, and I'm the co-founder. I'm the co-founder of Kaiyuanshe. Then Nadia say Kaiyuanshe is a Chinese open source alliance, and my open source journey is from job. I'm Taiwanese, and I'm born and raised in Taiwan. There is a project called Open Source Software Foundry in Taiwan, and I work in the project for 5 years. Then I know what is open source, and I'm an advocate and evangelist to many Taiwan's institute or in campus. Yeah, and then I go to China because 12 years ago, go to China in Shanghai because I want to join a software startup in Shanghai. And the name is Git Cafe, like a GitHub. job. Yeah, but and then I go to Huawei. Do you know Huawei? It's a very big company, and I joined Huawei to responsible for Huawei Cloud's AI ecosystem and Huawei's some open source project in Huawei for 7 years. And then I go to another company. It's called 01.ai. It's an AI unicorn company, one of the 6 AI unicorn company in China. Yeah, maybe you learn more about DeepSeek, right? But maybe we can talk later. So I know AI model and open source, and my career job is over 15 years, and maybe I can tell something on the stage or under the table of the stage to you when we hang out. Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you, Richard. So you asked whether people might have heard of DeepSeek. Has anyone at this point not heard of DeepSeek? Okay, good. Well, that's a good start. Obviously, we've heard a lot about it, but from my standpoint, at least, I've heard about it from the channels that I read. So whether that's LinkedIn or the press or whatever, I haven't heard many takes on it from people who actually live and work in China. So, Richard, given you just finished your introduction and mentioned it, can you give us your take on DeepSeek, where it comes from, why it's broken through in the way it has?
Sorry.
What's your take on DeepSeek?
Yeah, first question.
First question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, maybe I go first. Okay. Actually, I have tried the model and applications of DeepSeek and also read the technical report of DeepSeek. And so first of all, I think they have done very solid and innovative engineering work, and they share their work in details. So I think they show a great sense of a great spirit of open source. And as for the impact to the industry, I think that the popularity of DeepSeek really promoted the widespread use of AI in China. You know that it is the Chinese New Year holidays these days, and many friends go back to their hometown to stay with their families. And some of my friends told me that even in some undeveloped area, some rural area, some old people who haven't received good education even heard about DeepSeek and began to have some conversations with AI. And for the developers, I think the biggest impact is that the price of large language model has been rapidly decreased. You know that the price of OpenAI's O1 model is about $60 for each million output tokens, while the price of DeepSeek is only about $2. So the significant price drop gives developers who are now building applications based on large language models great opportunities. They can provide their product to the users at a lower cost, and that may give them a greater opportunity to make profit. Okay. Yes, and as I don't write code myself, so I also asked my tech colleagues what do they think about what do they think about the popularity of DeepSeek, and just like many developers from all over the world, seeing DeepSeek have achieved such good results with limited resources, they are not only happy for them, but also want to learn from them and maybe catch up with them. Yes,
I think we all do. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe one day share their own work in the community. Mm-hmm. And as for sharing their own work in the community, I think that DeepSeek is a really good model for people to learn that open source, to realize the power of open source.
So yes. It sounds like it's reaching the normal person on the street. So they've now heard about DeepSeek, they've heard about AI, they're actually starting to use it, engage with it. Yes. It sounds like you're talking up very much the fact that they've open sourced a lot of this, the open weights. Obviously the data's not, but the code. Yes. And so that's a positive. And it sounds like it's kicked off a little bit of a wave of innovation amongst your engineering friends.
Yes, and I think the popularity of DeepSeek may lead more people to contribute to the open source community, to the open world, and maybe in the near future we can have a more open AI ecosystem.
Fantastic. So
Yes.
Richard, anything to add?
Yeah,
to your
so
perspective?
I mean, like people probably have read about, a lot about the reports and the technical details. In fact, it has been generating such a hype that even my dad, like 71-year-old, he was asking me all the questions. So it pretty much drains all my energy during the Lunar New Year on my family table. Yeah, but like because I actually run teams, right, and we also just directly serving the CTO. One thing which we found to be really mesmerizing is the company actually runs very differently. From organization perspective, it has like a bunch from 40 to like I think now it has like more than 100 people. But at the very beginning, it's only 40 people. They only hire like super, like I would say super smart. Actually, not from top universities, but from like pretty good universities, and they put them together and work more like really like a lab. Because I have a human-centered design background, there was this idea lab. At one time that, like one thing they did is like they pretty much offer everyone a freedom to do whatever they want. And they're even allowed to actually, like if they have a good idea, they can pretty much drive as much as GPUs as they want to prove or disprove the idea. And the whole organization is super flat. For that, it's very impressive because there has been a lot of big companies working on AI and trying to essentially do the same thing, but they fail to do so. Yeah.
So you're talking there about this is the hedge fund.
Right. It's basically the company spin off from the hedge fund.
So the company is a separate spin-off.
Right. So the company actually spin off from the hedge fund, I believe in 2023 May, has been running as a separate company since then. And the separate company has been running pretty much like the original version of OpenAI, as far as I can tell from based on public information.
And just interestingly, on the company itself, was the hedge fund well known in China? Before DeepSeek? Before DeepSeek?
Not famous, but it earns much money. Yeah.
It's a successful hedge fund.
Yeah,
it's actually more like a quant company rather than a hedge fund. Yeah, but it is a hedge fund for sure. Yeah, but it's more like quant company. Yeah.
Okay. And the team is very low key, and the CEO is very low key man. So yeah.
Okay. And is it normal for financial services organizations like this to spin off teams of engineers doing this type of work? Like, what do you think it is that motivated them?
I'm not sure the motivate, but I can see the outcome because open source LLM is if you win succeed and many proprietary and close AI model, you won't see them. So open source is the bottom line, and the bottom line is higher. And then maybe OpenAI see that is a very
Okay. So it was almost like a challenge. They saw
challenge.
OpenAI there.
Yeah.
They were playing with the open source, and they thought, let's see if we can figure something out to try and get some sort of similar results.
Yeah, so it almost feels like, I mean, there has been, by the way, like before it begins talking, we should probably say this, like since me and Nadia, we work for the same company, opinions are our own. Yeah, so it doesn't represent any of the company's opinion. Yeah, so as you described, it's rare. In fact, I mean, there has been a lot of those kind of discussion about like first principles. I mean, there has been a lot of quote from like Elon Musk and from like Sam Altman in terms of why they did that in the very first place. So one thing which we found to be very interesting is the founder of a DeepSeek company. They kind of follow the holistic follow the same kind of first principle. They kind of believe in that all the existing methodologies of building AGI. Oh, by the way, the company was actually focusing more on building AGI, and it's less about building an AI product which is serving the community. It's less about that. It's about AGI. They holistically follow that, and of course, I mean, nobody knows how to do it. So what they end up doing is really kind of put together a bunch of like smart people, of course, with the best talent you can get there, and give them freedom and give them certain level of supports, and the rest was history. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe people say, what is the business model of DeepSeek? And I will ask, what is business model of OpenAI? Because they all don't earn money. Now, their cost is higher, than their income. So, but the advantage of the DeepSeek is their mother company. It's a quant company that earn much, so they can, they can put, make the cost, Yeah, so DeepSeek.
DeepSeek is a spin out of that squat.
Yes.
Spin out, split up.
And is it normal in China to develop open source models, or is it actually normal to develop proprietary models? Can you talk to us a bit about what the AI landscape looks like outside of DeepSeek at this point in time?
Yeah, Chinese open source developer, they like open source models because it's you can easily to deploy it by yourself. Because if you to call APIs, then you should put your data to the platform, to the server. So it's private, and it's maybe if I have a GPUs and I can do it myself. So open source is good, but sometimes many developers they will see the price, because if I deploy it myself, the price the cost is very high. So sometimes many like a Chinese version, like Together AI and the Fireworks in China version, they will earn money to sell the APIs token.
I mean, like, it's probably not easy for us to speak into the open models, but Nadia actually has a lot of knowledge about open source ecosystem in general.
Yes, and as for the AI large language model companies in China, there are 6 famous startups. We call that the 6 tigers. And many big enterprises also invest a lot in large language model. For example, Alibaba, Baidu, Huawei, and maybe half of them are open sourced and half of them are closed sourced, right?
Okay. And is it normal for Chinese enterprises to use OpenAI?
Yes, I think many individuals use OpenAI. Okay. It's now the enterprise.
Yeah, so I would say yes and no, because I mean internally there are definitely some concerns in terms of the data that we use to engage that work. Yeah.
If you provide to C service, you cannot use the model from outside of China. You just can use the Chinese company's model. But if you is a to B service, you can use you use like ChatGPT or Llama. Yeah, in China it's like that.
We're talking right now about DeepSeek and obviously Chinese models. Please, if anyone in the audience would like to ask any questions, you're more. Oh, there's one from Amanda herself. Is there a mic anywhere that we can use? Otherwise, I will walk over Amanda.
So I want to start by saying thank you, because Nadia and Richard invited me to visit China for the first time earlier this year, last year. It's all blurred. And they are part of an ecosystem that is translating the open source law, policy and practice book that I edited a couple of years ago. And they're translating it into Mandarin, which is a huge undertaking. And I think it's a fabulous initiative. So thank you for that. When I was there, the ecosystem of open source software people was huge. Do you think that the AI ecosystem doing open source at a community level is also big, or is it all in the enterprise?
I mean, first thing first, we cannot predict the future. We actually got a lot of this question about, like if we think about iPhone moments, right? Like, where are we? There has been, like all sort of different perspectives. My perspective is like, now I think it's a Palm moment. It's not even the BlackBerry moment yet. So in terms of like Amanda's question, I would say there are equal interest from the individual level and corporate level. From individual level, one term actually got really popular last year in China too is indie hackers, right? Because now with all the AI tooling and utilities, people can actually build like, a company or two and begin selling their product all by themselves. So we begin hearing the term indie hackers or like solopreneurs, right? Those terms begin showing up again. And that kind of resembles a lot from the very beginning of Apple App Store, in which you can actually make a weather app, make like like millions of dollars, surprisingly. On the business side, I would say that generally speaking, there has been a huge trend of enterprises adopting the AI technologies internally for their own and for their clients. So we're actually seeing like a general trends on both sides, I would say. I'm not sure if I have enough time for the details, but we can expand on that later. Yeah.
And maybe I can, if in the future the computation power is cheap enough, like now there are so many open source software developers. They use their PCs to coding and to contribute to the open source project. Now, if you want to train an AI model, it's so expensive. So if in the future it's cheap enough and we can collaborate with each other, then the open source spirit and atmosphere will be happen again in the AI ecosystem.
Okay, anyone else before we move on? Here we go.
Hi, thanks for coming, obviously. There's a perception in the West that the Chinese ecosystem is very nationalistic. And I wondered if you see that in China, if that is the perception that Chinese products are preferred.
Sorry, what was the term that you used?
There's a perception in the West that China is nationalistic when it comes to its tech ecosystem.
Is Chinese tech preferred inside China? What are your personal observations on that? Like, would you use Western technology, and are you fully embracing of that, or would you prefer to use Chinese technology?
Well, I mean, maybe you can speak into that a little bit. Well, I mean, first thing first, disclaimer, we can't speak on their behalf. But first thing first, we don't bite. As you see us here, it's like, we attend the conference, like we pretty much behave the same way as how the conference attendees are behaving. We have taste. I mean, like, and to some extent, I would say that especially for people working in open source, there has been a general consensus that if you're working open source, you are probably not going to be doing open source for Asia or China or North America. Open source is open source. Yeah. But on the other side, thank you.
Yeah, fair play. Round of applause.
Yeah. But on the other hand, people do have their own preferences. I would say the language barrier is actually one thing which we're facing. In fact, I mean, like, Ant Group was my first job in China. I'm actually a bit surprised to see, people are actually pretty good at, they're proficient at listening to English, but the oral speaking or async communication skills sometimes are already there, especially when you want to get really deep engagement in open source communities. So for that, I'm actually watching for help here. Is if you see Chinese developers in the ecosystem, for better or for worse, and not explaining themselves in the most proper English or in the most proper way, please help them. They're all very willing to actually participate in the communities, but as far as I can tell, there's a long way to go to really kind of get people to be familiar, to be well trained, to participate in open source communities. I believe that will definitely help with your question there. Yeah.
And I want to point out that open source AI model is not equal to open source software itself. Because software, you can see the source code. And so-called open source AI or open AI model, you can just see the weight. Okay, for example, we release our weight and some inference code. You can use it. You can do a fine-tune alignment, but you cannot rebuild this model because you don't have the data. Right? You don't have the, for example, the code, inference code, or you can have inference code, but no fine-tune code. So it's like a black box, maybe to some. So we have some paranoid. For example, also maybe Chinese company have some paranoia to use the Western. It's each other. It's each other. So maybe in the future, the real open source AI happened. We have the data, we have the algorithm. It will be like open source world, and we don't have to paranoid with each other.
Interestingly, it sounds like a lot of this. Another round of applause. It sounds like there's a lot of similarities in the way that we're thinking, just on the Chinese side versus the Western side. We want to be careful who we provide our data to. We want to make sure that we have sovereignty. We want to make sure it's secure. Amanda talked about, obviously, you translating a book. That's great. Are you actually using AI to translate her book, or are you?
No, I mean, like, come on, I'm still better than them.
Yes, and they did the work maybe the year before last year. So AI is not so popular at that time, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a manual translation. That's great to hear. But in all seriousness, you said that language barrier was maybe somewhat of an issue when it comes to adopting Western technology. I mean, it's a genuine question. Are you seeing initiatives to sort of help with that by using AI in China, or is that not happening at this point?
Well, I mean, like, first thing first, there are definitely initiatives. In fact, in regarding to if they're AI or not, I think the people behavior are the same. I'll just give you one example. It's like I have a 3-year-old at home. When I'm looking at that boy, I mean, like, I'll be spending enough time with him. I think this is really just an LLM. It's like the same thing. Like
A deep learning machine.
so it's like black box, chaotic system, but well, there's intrinsic difference as like he's the boss.
And you never know what he's going to say.
Precisely, yeah. So there will be hallucinations for sure. It's like eating 2 cookies on the same day. But I mean, like, honestly, just Matt, as you mentioned, I think like the Gen AI is actually a pretty powerful productivity utility. Based on what I mean, I still have a lot of people, like my friends in Bay Area, in Singapore, and I've been talking to them regularly. People are seeing the same thing, right? It's like we're using that for education, for translation, for kind of building better content, like by generating better pictures, and all of that still applies. I mean, it's the same. It's the same across the borders, yeah.
We have about 12 minutes left. There's a question at the back here. And then I'll come to you.
Hi, just on the closed box, black box topic. So Allen AI Institute released Momo and Pixmo models, which are fully open, and the data sets are open. And Granite and IBM, it's not fully transparent, but it's kind of getting there. Do you see those tendencies happening in China as well?
Oh yes, China have. I know some in research institute and academia, the circus. They, for example, one open source AI community is called MAP NAIL. M-A-P is like a model. I forgot it's a abbreviation, MAP NAIL, N-E-O. This community, they focus on totally open source AI, open the data and the algorithm and the paper. So there are, even it's few, but I know several, like Map, Neo, and the other name I forgot. Maybe I can give you later. So the researcher there, they will put this into the paper and share to the world, not only in China. So the paper is open source, right? So I think very few people in China do this, but still have.
So I worked for Alpha AI last year, right? In fact, I mean, one thing which Alpha AI has been working really hard on was the model openness framework. I know the whole OpenAI thing is still I mean, the open AI is still being defined. But the model openness framework, to be honest, actually provide a pretty reasonable framework to gauge the openness of a particular model. In fact, there is only one model which passes the class 1 test. And it's from China BAAI. It's called Zhiyuan Yanjiuyuan. So it's a BAAI research institution in Beijing. That's the only class 1 model pass the test. So we're pretty open, yeah.
Yeah, and many Chinese unicorn is its original is in the research center, and they go to do a 质谱 AI and the Kimi and something, yeah.
So I'm coming here first. Hi.
Hi, thanks for being here and sharing. This is fascinating. I was wondering how closely these 6 tiger companies are working with chip manufacturers, either in China or in the West, because that's a pretty big thread with the AI companies in the West has been working closely with chip manufacturers.
How closely?
Yeah, I mean, like, none of us working in the hardware industry, so sorry, it's probably not a question I can answer. No, yeah, I mean, I don't think you have the right.
I was working in one of the 6 unicorns AI company. My previous job is in, I'm the head of open source and developer ecosystem in 01.ai, which is founded by Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. Maybe you heard of him. And actually, the Alibaba Cloud, they invest many companies. I remember the 6 AI unicorn. There are 5 AI unicorns received the investment from Alibaba Cloud. Yeah. So yeah, Alibaba Cloud just invested almost all of them, and see what it happened. Maybe it will grow up. It will dead. We don't know. And every unicorn, AI unicorns in China, they are all on the journey to find a way to earn money, because because maybe investors in China is more realistic to ask them to earn money. So pressure, very high pressure, and maybe we see the American company, they don't have such a pressure to instantly to find a way to earn money. So even I quit last December, but I know the company is struggling on how to make money. Yes.
There's just one back here.
Richard, you mentioned about Richard B. You mentioned about the open source AI model that qualifies, has the #1 rating. You just previously mentioned. Here in the West, I had no idea that existed. So what is the right channels we can consume to learn more about what's happening in China and similar activities?
Yeah. Actually, that was a question in which 3 of us was kind of discussing about that. I think the question was primarily about, how we can facilitate those kind of information exchange, right? In fact, I mean, like, we did a PR release on Alpha AI and Data website, but I understand why you haven't seen it. I think that's like basically one thing in which I'll probably also need to make this call to action. So, I mean, like, we talked about this too much yesterday too. I mean, I think the fact that we are able to really kind of sit on the stage here today and really being able to, honestly, we didn't expect the AMA. We had a script.
It's okay.
And this becomes it becomes a different game now. But I mean, like, this is okay. I mean, being able to really kind of having some of this kind of communication in a very candid way is something that we're all willing to do. Of course, this is not scalable. So I don't have a direct answer to your question, but I believe there are several things in which we can do. One is for people like us, maybe we should be a little bit more vocal about writing stuff, and I've been discussing with Richard about like having a podcast or something. And we just talk about observation, because I mean, like, honestly, we had this kind of concern about like maybe we don't know enough. In fact, I don't think we know enough either, but that's not the point. The point is like, I think we're getting to a state in which people are kind of all living in their own echo chambers. It's just like the natural awareness about, the existence of such echo chamber. At least for people like showing up here today, like for Open UK, event, we believe that we're essentially the open source. And there need to be more information exchange on both sides. Yeah.
Perfect example of that was I asked the same question yesterday and learned about a database called, I think, Ocean Base.
Yes, Ocean Base.
That I'd never heard of before.
Yeah, that's from Ant Group, by the way.
And you were showing me the performance of that and kind of what it did. And I was like, gosh, I've worked in databases in open source for 10, 15 years, and I've never heard of that database. So like, there's clearly unbelievable technology there that we're just not engaging with or using for whatever reason. And I feel like at least starting the conversation and having this this chat, even within the Open UK community and audience, is a good start. And because, as you were saying yesterday, none of you bite. None of you are.
Yes. Actually, people don't know how to get the news, the information of China open source software, and the Chinese developers also don't know how to read the global communities. Yes, I think there are some cultural barriers, and the language is also a big problem, I think.
I think one thing we can do is for Kaiyuanshe, they have this kind of annual report. So which we just translate to English, as far as I know. So maybe Nadia can talk into that.
Yes, we just released the 2024 China Open Source Annual Report a week ago, but now it is in Chinese, and we are working closely with the volunteers in the community to translate that into Japanese and English. And maybe you can follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and after the translation has been finished, I will publish.
Alex, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm curious what you're saying about awareness of open source. In the United States, and I think probably much of the Western world, it's a pretty small community of people who really understand open source, and it's mostly used in enterprise infrastructure, really. I'm curious about is that the similar story in China? Is it still pretty nascent? And maybe you could comment on the movement and how it's maturing.
Yeah, and I think in China, I see some people, they are very it's an expert on open source. They know much about all of the open source things, and especially in some companies. For example, I was previously work in Huawei, and the Huawei open source team is very professional. They know all about open source and how to comply with the rules and how to engage people into the community. But some people in Huawei is employee. They are just working for Huawei. They don't have to, and they will not willing to know much about open source. Then they just use the process. The open source team give the process. You should do this like open source. It's done. So there are too many kinds of developers in China. Yeah.
Yes, for many developers, open source is you can use the software for free. Yeah. So they know little about open source. But I think the situation is being changed. Yes. Actually, during our research for the 2024 China Open Source Annual Report, we conducted some questionnaire to the developers in China. And I can share some data with you that currently in the process of career selection, more and more developers, especially the top developers, in addition to paying attention to the salaries and the benefits provided by the employer, are also increasingly emphasizing their own personal value and the open engineer culture of the enterprise. Yes, and the questionnaire survey showed that if a company actively embraces open source and encourages developers to contribute freely in the community, it will greatly enhance the competitiveness of the employer among the job seekers.
Yeah, so like one thing I definitely observed is in terms of the total population of developers, I believe the numbers shown is like I think China is ranked the second on GitHub contribution, with like the US have like 22 million and China for 11 million. So that's core number. But if you think about the people you're meeting in the community, it probably doesn't reflect that. number percentile. How so is because most of the developers, as we discussed, they're not well trained. They are able to participate in open source, but they're not able to really go deep into the community, let alone with in-depth community engagement. We are working on that. In fact, a couple of us, for and open source, we've been doing a lot to help our own internal developers to teach them on how to do this kind of GitHub engagement. Teach their English, having hackathons and trainings to help them out. Really something like those. We've been seeing, I would say, effects, but it's definitely like a long-term investment rather than short-term. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and more enterprises have already agreed with the value of open source. So from the perspective of enterprises, so according to the Open Rank, we can see that among the 20 top enterprises worldwide ranked by activity on GitHub in 2024, China accounts for 4 seats that are Huawei, Alibaba, Ant Group, and Baidu. Yeah, so there are many professionals, open source professionals working for these companies. And these companies are leading more developers, young developers, to contribute to the community, contribute back to the upstream. Yes.
Yeah, and the Chinese government has the policy to improve open source. Yeah, in the 14th five-year plan. Yeah, 14th five-year plan. And open source is the one of the policy, like AI, like cloud computing, is put in the policy and have so many budget. And the budget to establish, for example, the Open Atom Open Source Foundation. Yeah, what is that is Open Atom Open Source Foundation. And so many companies, they will receive the budget to improve their open source. So it's a good thing.
Yes. I have introduced the 14th five-year plan of China's government last year at the State of OpenCon, and maybe you can see the video. And some local governments also introduced some regulations or policies to support open source, such as to give some financial support or investments to the open source startups, and also provide free the conference venue to the tech conferences.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? We're out of time. You're presenting the next.
Oh, is our panel next?
Yes, no, it's I think it's Felix.
Oh, okay. I'll save it for later. I don't want to compete on the next presentation. Thanks.
Okay, ask away.
Oh, okay. About 2 years ago, there was a lot of pushback on open source and opening LLMs. Sam Altman, famously said, hey, we got to be safe. We can't risk these LLMs being open. Did you have that kind of debate? Was there that kind of debate in China at all about the safety of opening an LLM and using, open weights and such?
Yeah, one of my famous speaker, Simon Sinek, I really love his speech. He had the speech of starting with why. I really love that speech. So that speech had the nature about when people say something, I'll probably consider why he's saying that. Right. So the way I'm looking at it is I would say that it's very possible for someone to not speaking to the truth, but seems to be reasonable. That's my take on that. With DeepSeek, we definitely see that there has been some change of narratives in terms of OpenAI's own narrative. And the way I'm looking at it, I do have my friends working at OpenAI too. So I know the company has a top-notch talents. It's undeniable that's still in the leading edge. So as the US, I would say overall Gen AI initiatives. That said, the way we're looking at it is in open source, we trust to some extent, right? There has been a lot of debate about open software versus closed software, which one is more secure, right? I believe for people in this room, we're a believer of one side versus the other, but that debate actually still continues. Similar things applies to LLM. I would imagine that to be an ongoing conversation. It won't really come to a conclusion. I would say both sides will coexist. But as someone who has been working in, I spent enough time under different systems like British education system and the US working environment, and now work for a Chinese company. So what I'm looking at is the diversity helps. It makes me a better person. It doesn't make me a smart person, but probably makes me a better person.
I think on that note, I would like to say a humongous thank you to our panelists. And